So thank you for joining us today, everyone, for our September webinar. My name is Megan Lebeda. I'm a program manager here at Kirkwood Corporate Training. Today, joining us, we have Lisa Folken to lead her session on leadership that leverages strengths. Lisa is recently retired from higher education administration here at Kirkwood Community College with over 20 years of experience in program development, student services, and community engagement. As the director of the Kirkwood Jones County Regional Center, she led one of Iowa's most successful high school concurrent enrollment programs. A Gallup certified strengths coach and adjunct faculty member since 2013, Lisa remains active in education through part-time work with Kirkwood and now offers consulting and leadership coaching across industries. So with that, Lisa, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we're excited to hear from you today.
Great. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. And thank you to Megan for that kind introduction. I'm going to share my screen here. It's just going to take me a minute to get this pulled up, but just want to share just kind of a little bit more about me and kind of why, whoopsie, sorry about that. Hopefully you should see my full screen now. Okay, so first of all, the title of my webinar here is Lead Hership. And so I say that up front just to make it clear that this is how I did things. This isn't necessarily a how-to manual, just like we are with as parenting, right? Sometimes we don't have a manual, and so we kind of figure things out as we go. And this is something that just became very valuable and important to me, and kind of obviously most relevant with what Megan described for purposes of today is the fact that I'm a certified Gallup strengths coach and have been since 2017. And really what that was, what that allowed me to do was then kind of figure out myself, understand myself, for kind of maybe the first time, giving myself permission to kind of fully understand me, embrace myself as a new leader, and figure out how to kind of channel that into my team into a strengths-based culture. As that director. So anyway, that was just kind of my philosophy of things. And so I want to start by just saying that oftentimes you can kind of put the path to leadership in two different camps. There's multiple, but this is the way I see it. And those are kind of those that desire to become a leader. So those are the students that are in high school or even perhaps beyond that are just you constantly see these kind of skills and abilities within them, and kind of actively promote them, encourage them to be a part of student council and all of these things. And they might be your best case managers that are moving, that are being very intentional in their college and career choice in terms of constantly fighting for kind of what's next to get that next opportunity, that next job promotion, and putting a lot of effort behind that. The other side of it is those who are selected kind of with or without approval, and I kind of put myself in that. So for that student, kind of the path for college and career might be a little bit uncertain, and that was certainly me. And so basically what I was doing throughout my young career life was kind of choosing doors of opportunity that was really based on impact in what I was doing and fulfillment, not necessarily any job titles. Okay. I generally just always showed a strong work ethic. I had high emotional intelligence. There's a saying out there that says IQ gets you hired and EQ gets you promoted. And I guess that's kind of what just kept happening to me. And I was just really thrilled to be a part of it and always wanting to do more, and kind of always gave my 110%. And lastly, I was just always prioritizing connecting with people over exerting influence. And what you'll learn throughout this session is that that's just generally me. That's what comes natural to me, is building connections with people and better understanding people, working with people, helping people, all of those things. So I could have never predicted that I would have ended up in higher education. I just kept opening the right doors and really just kind of leveraging my strengths throughout. So, sometimes the greatest rewards actually just come organically because of the work we did rather than the job that we aspired to do. Again, not always, but that's just kind of what happened with me. So again, I want to talk about just a few things that were really I prioritize, or things that were important to me in leadership. And again, this is in higher education. I know that's not relevant to necessarily all of you, but this is kind of how I applied it. And it's okay if it doesn't fit in nicely with this. We all have our strengths and abilities, and we all have our ways of accomplishing things. And so my first one is being visionary. So it's super important to me to kind of, it seems kind of obvious, but to think and act and look beyond what's right in front of us and constantly looking beyond. And what that meant was not only just into the future, but also looking beyond our current role and really deeply understanding team roles, individual roles. And I love the fact that I want to give an example of my own mom. And people have said throughout the years how much I look like her and sound like her and act like her. And I take that as a great compliment. But she was a superintendent of Anamosa schools here many years ago, kind of right about when I had my start here in Monticello. And as a superintendent, that first year, like a lot of managers do in kind of larger positions, they use that first year as a way of kind of a deeper understanding of kind of what's going on around them, without rather than trying to make some big, huge changes. What I loved about what she did was that deep understanding of others. And she did that by immersing herself into positions. So she had never been a bus driver before. She had never worked in the food service, and she had never been a custodian. But guess what? She put that aside, her own responsibilities, and worked in those fields, worked alongside of her own team members so that she could better understand not only what they were through, but what they need. And what are they bringing to their role? Why is this important to them? And what kind of work are they doing? So to me, that was really instrumental in kind of laying a great foundation. And obviously, both of my parents modeled just some amazing gifts and talents and abilities throughout their years. And obviously, I attribute that to my success as well. The second one that kind of goes along with this is communication. So again, this is one of my top 5 strengths, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And so communication obviously can be mostly good, but not always, right? So I tend to say a lot, and my husband and I are actually very different with this, both with our communication styles in parenting, as I was in leadership, is that I always want to say more. And he was of the mentality of less is more. So obviously, there's a balance both in parenting and both in leadership and in work. And what I found is that I just needed to kind of be aware of my communication and make sure that it wasn't a barrier, that it wasn't a problem or being seen negatively, that my transparency and my perhaps over communication was accepted among others. And that's what's just came naturally to me. So that was really hard for me to kind of stop that, even to the point of listening. Listening is obviously very important with communication. And sometimes I had to stop myself and listen first because I was very quick to want to give advice or give support and that type of thing. And sometimes I just need to stop. Okay. And then on the other side, there we have integrity and adaptability. The first one is integrity, and that's just by obviously aligning yourself, making sure that not only are you in the right seat, but that you're on the right bus. Okay, so that you actually have an opportunity to make sure that your values and your kind of align with the organizational mission, vision, and values. And if your organization isn't like constantly looking at that and kind of supporting that or having you examine that, that might be just a chance for you to reflect, especially if things don't feel very comfortable at any time, is that you take that time to really look at that. I also feel like it's important to own mistakes. Just like as a parent, again, I use a lot of analogies here. I've never expected my own children to be perfect, and or my team members, right? We all make mistakes. And so with both of those types of people, whether it's again our children or our team members, is that again, we're all going to make mistakes, and I can model that. I'm making mistakes, and this is how I own it, and this is how we're going to learn from it together and move on. So that leading by example is just so critical. And then adaptability. And adaptability is not only the ability to respond, but for me, it's about anticipating and actually setting aside very intentional time. So what I would do oftentimes is, I'm in education, and we had students there at very specific 2.5-hour segments twice a day. And so I was able to anticipate, when is the busy time? When is a busy time for my faculty? When is a busy time for our students? And what might they need? So it didn't make sense for me to take a lunch during that time or schedule meetings during that time. I was very intentional about being present and engaged and not having other things planned, if at all possible, so that I could really be present. And so I didn't see those as a distraction or see those as interruptions, but yet those were what people really needed. And that's how I made myself present and available in my leadership. So next, I want to dive into strengths. So first of all, not sure exactly how familiar all of you are, but Gallup has strengths assessments. And again, to me, they're very powerful. And what it does is it basically has you fill out about a 30 to 45-minute questionnaire. And through that questionnaire or assessment, you learn about kind of what are your top 5 strengths. And then if you want to, you can unlock all 34 strengths. And really what they do is they start out as talents. It can be a little bit confusing. Sometimes those words are used interchangeable, but I'm going to explain the difference. So the first thing is that we all have this innate talents living with inside of us. This is what we're born with. So if you can think about yourself about like, boy, sometimes there's just people that are just naturally really good at some things. Chances are they haven't necessarily learned that. It's probably natural to them. But over time, if they exercise that and they put a lot of time and energy and investment into that, they become strengths. Okay. So by doing this, that's where those kind of that natural ability can kind of differentiate between the natural ability and then the strengths. And I'm going to use an example. I was a competitive swimmer all of my life until college or through the beginning of college. And I would say that I had some natural ability with that swimming. But it wasn't until I really made the decision to focus in on that and provide and put very intentional work and effort and energy into my training and time. So that meant, year-round swimming all of the time. And by doing that, I was able to kind of compete at a very high level. But what would have happened had I not done that? If I would have just given kind of that bare minimum, then that talent would kind of remain where it was. I would always be probably fairly decent, but I wasn't going to hit that maximum potential. And so that's really how strengths are, is that it's that ability of kind of recognizing where your talents are and then putting that time and energy in it. And by doing that, there's research that shows that in work, that by using your strengths and ideally doing them as much as possible, ideally every day, is going to lead to a more fulfilling life, superior work performance, engagement, and just productivity in and outside of your work. Essentially, it's giving you permission to be that person that you've always aspired to be. It becomes easy to apply, easy to say, hey, this job is easy for me. It's not outside of my box. For instance, I always have great appreciation for artists. And I know that that's not something I would ever be good at. And that's okay. I can set that aside. So again, if I beat myself up every day trying to go, gosh, I really want to be that artist. No, that's just going to create a lot of frustration for me. So these are those natural abilities. And again, that's going to lead to kind of that greater comfort and excitement and actually that coming alive in the work. So I have a few questions up here, and we're not going to I don't need you to answer them or anything like that. I just kind of pose them as kind of actually facts that we're going to just kind of work our ways through as actually not questions. But basically, I just want you to think about whether or not this is true or false. The first one is job descriptions should seek very specific strengths. I want you to think about that. So obviously, as you're hiring for positions, you might think of what does that job description look like? What am I looking for in a person? And so it might be a natural tendency for us to go, yes, I want this person to look like this. Okay. Chances are, if we do, it means that we've had some experiences with people that have done that very well and very naturally using their strengths. Okay. So in contrast, we just don't want to focus on that. I'll just give you an example here because um, after, we had the very first regional center open up in Monticello. And after that, we have 5 directors that are running centers. And each of our directors kind of had a very different set of strengths. Okay. And it wasn't that any one of us was better than the other. It was about how are we applying those strengths in our daily work? What are we doing? What's working for us in that role as a director? Okay. So again, it wasn't matter that we had to kind of fit this mold. We had to just kind of figure out this is who we are and this is how we will work through this job and this work. Okay. So next one is kind of understand. It's important to understand or know where your weaknesses are. And this is really tough for me. So once I unlocked all of my 34 talents, As you might imagine, it was very natural for me to want to look at the bottom of the list, right? That's just a natural tendency that we want to do is go, oof, what are my weaknesses, right? And you're really thinking about, rather than still focusing on those top 5 or top 10, is that you're hyper focusing on, oh, these are the things I'm bad at. And so what I want you to do instead is, rather than thinking of them as weaknesses, is kind of think of them as like fear. And Trevor Reagan is a fantastic speaker that I just love. And he has this TED talk that he talks about how to overcome fears. Actually, it was in Cedar Rapids. And he talks about owning fear. So rather than being fearless, is to kind of own it and know where it's at. So he suggests putting fear in the back seat. Okay. Put it in the rearview mirror. Right? So you know it's there. But if we don't, our brain is going to take over. It doesn't know the difference between danger and something that's just scaring us, right? Um, Much like my students have in communication class and giving speeches, right? So we've all been there, right? It's the class that everybody loves to hate. So much like fear, it's about understanding where they are and knowing that they're okay to sit there, and we acknowledge it. We're not going to hyper focus on it, because guess what? No matter what we do, it's never going to be comfortable for us, ever. Much like as if I was starting to write with my left hand, I'm right handed, right? It would never become as easy or natural, right? And so we have to kind of let that go. And Trevor even goes so far as to say things like, with fear, is to dance with it, dance with the fear. So we want to kind of dance with our weaknesses too, is really understanding kind of where they're at and knowing how we might find people to complement us. And we'll talk about that in a second, which works into our next one. So it's hard to work with colleagues with different strengths. And this can go for, any relationship in your life. If we're constantly looking at people going, oof, that person is just not like me, and I am really struggling with it. Okay. It's a natural tendency, again, to do that. And what's more important is that we kind of shift that to be maybe more of a compliment, right? If we are constantly trying to put them into a mold or expect them to be something they aren't, guess what? That's going to create hardship and frustration for both them and for you. So not good for anybody. So again, I know specifically when I was working on budget, or when I was working on something that was super uncomfortable for me, I knew exactly who to ask to help support me. And that's what works, is identifying. And that's why it's not just important to know yourself, but to know your team members. And so that you can really leverage each other and work together to be the most productive team, right? The best team. If you're not doing that, it's that chances are you aren't really fully utilizing all of those skills and abilities. And lastly, it's like I should channel my team into areas where I need them to win for the good of the team. So I'm going to share a story with you again. And this is about my experience as a competitive swimmer. So in high school, I had done quite well. And again, that was through that hard work where I put that time and energy into my swimming, and really made a difference in my competitive swimming. I was, again, doing quite well. So much that I wanted to pursue swimming in college, and I was offered some scholarships for both Iowa and Iowa State. And I felt very thankful for that. And again, it was kind of all that hard work paying off. And so I was very intentional about my decision to attend Iowa State. I was born and raised a Hawkeye, but all of a sudden I'm like, I think I want to go to Iowa State. Why? Because the coach recruited me to do things that were my best, having me at my best. So things that were most natural, things that I was comfortable with, things that I loved. Okay. So that turned out to be, I was a sprint freestyler. I did a little bit of butterfly, a little bit of some other things, but primarily my wheelhouse was in that the sprint events, and a little bit of butterfly. So the unfortunate thing about this story is that I showed up to time trials in one of the very first weeks of practice. And unfortunately, I did quite well in time trials, so much that I became one of the top butterflyers for our team. What do you suppose might have happened? So at that point, our coach said, guess what? You're our new butterflyer. And to that point, I said, no, I don't want that. Right. It's, again, kind of that method of before going, how did I get here? Wait a minute. This isn't what I signed up for. And so over the course of the next couple months, I'm going to tell you that it got pretty ugly. So I was a freshman, and it was a really rough time for me. So much that I was losing sleep. I was having panic attacks. I grew to resent not only him, but my team, swimming in general, something that I had worked so hard in all of my life to be that competitive swimmer at the college level, to earn a scholarship, right? And so, I knew I wasn't going to quit in the middle of the season. And so spring came around. And again, my fall and my winter and my early spring were miserable. I was really unhappy. And so much that it was affecting my school. And I knew that I had to make some changes. I had to make changes in my life, or something was going to drop on the ground. And that was likely going to be my school. So I made the very conscious effort at the last event of my Big Eight competition. And Iowa State was a Big Eight school back then. I told my coach, I said, I just swam my last event for you. And that was a really hard conversation for him. I was emotional at that point, of course. And I said, I'm done. And he said, okay, I'll see you in my office to sign over your scholarship on Monday. And I did. And so for him, it was a matter of playing, always playing to win. And while I recognize that in coaching, and sometimes we're put beyond our kind of comfort level a little bit, some things that are outside of that comfort zone, to me, it changed everything for me. And I was no longer happy. I was miserable. My mental health was not great. My schoolwork was not great. And ultimately, the cost was that I was going to quit the team. And I did at the end of the season. So I want you to just kind of think about that. Is just we got to think about what kind of impact we're having on others when maybe we put people in the wrong spot. Okay. So we're going to dive into a little bit more of this. So strengths. So whether they're talents or strengths, we're going to kind of use again those kind of interchangeably. So we all have 34 strengths, and I'm going to show you those here in a second. We're not going to dive too deep into them because obviously most of you have not done your assessment. But we all have 34 talents or strengths, and they are lined up accordingly. And they actually turn out to be a very unique set of strengths in that order, much like a thumbprint. Not quite that specific, but it's very, very close because you can be matched with people all across the world that are like you. And believe it or not, I'm aware of 2 or 3 others that have the same strengths as me. And it is very uncommon. 1 in 33 million. Okay. So you've often been told that you were 1 in 1 million. You're actually 1 in 33 million. You just may not know it yet. So it's really just this ability to kind of think about your unique contribution and your value add, and how it impacts how you execute tasks, build relationships, influence others, and maybe perhaps think strategically. So this is kind of those 4 domains of leadership strengths, and here are all 34 themes listed here. And again, we're not going to spend a ton of time in here because it's just way more relevant once you have the chance to do the assessment and really dive into it. So basically, it falls under these kind of 4 categories: executing, influencing, relationship building, and strategic thinking. And whether you're a leader or not, or maybe you're aspiring to be, there isn't, again, this kind of magic formula of saying you should have 1 of each of these, or you should have 3 of each of these, or whatever. No, there's not that case at all. Again, it's all about kind of recognizing this is who I am, and this is how I will contribute, or how I will use my strengths in an everyday leadership role or whatever. Okay. So it's just important to know that. I don't really spend a whole lot of focus on each of these domains, just because for me, it's about those individual strengths. Okay. And we'll talk just a few more minutes about that as well. Okay. So this is fun for me. So I apologize. This picture is really grainy. Believe it or not, I couldn't find a great picture of Bozo the Clown from a long time ago that wasn't grainy. So I used to watch the show a bit when I was growing up, and Bozo the Clown had this show, and he would have these kids play games. And so you have this kiddo down here lined up with these buckets. They're called Bozo buckets. And the reason why I show this with you is I want you to envision those 34 strengths, those 34 talents lined up, 34 buckets right in front of you. And so, as you might imagine, that ball that he's going to throw in that first bucket, second, third, fourth, etc., are going to be pretty comfortable for him, right? It's not until you start getting beyond that 10, 11, 12, and you go all the way out to 34 that all of a sudden it's not comfortable. It's not successful, not productive, just not going to be very good, not going to be very good results. That's how we need to think about those buckets, is that if we're constantly being asked to use those things that are those 33, 34 buckets way far out there, it's not going to be pretty. Okay. It's going to be hard. It's going to be difficult. There's going to be resentments. There's going to be avoidance, and people are going to be unhappy in what they're doing, right? We love to have success. Guess what? This little kiddo is going to make those buckets, and everybody's going to cheer, right? And then what happens is they get far out, and it's just not, that's just not fun for any of us. Again, so this slows us down and makes us anxious. And again, to the point of avoidance or quitting. So I have a little Jamboard up here on the screen just to kind of get us a chance to think about a few things. So the strengths it's about a chance for you to obviously not only know yourself, but know your team. And the reason why this is so important is I want you to take you back in time. And I, as a young kid, again, I was in school a long time ago. And back then, the parent teacher conferences looked a lot like parents would go, students would stay home. And all of us kids would stay at home going, oh my gosh, what are they going to come back and say about us? And we were so nervous about what that might look like, about what kind of trouble we were going to get in. What do you suppose they said about me? Lisa's restless. She talks a lot. I can't get her to stop. Wouldn't it have been cool for me to have that opportunity to have some leadership opportunities at that point? So instead of being criticized for my communication and over talking, is to use that in class, even as a youngster. How might I do that? Or how would I use that energy? Okay. So again, those parent teacher conferences, again, I don't, that was just kind of the way of the world back then. I know that's shifted quite a bit. And I love that, because what happens over time is that when we continue to focus on people's weaknesses, you lose confidence, right? That's why it's so important as we're growing up. And I think our world has even shifted to kind of really celebrating the wins more so than even and the participation, even than the losses, right? Is that we're celebrating what's good in the world. We're celebrating what they've done right. And when we do that, we know there's facts, there's research behind that, that they're going to be more successful. And that's going to build our confidence. What happens over time is that when people lose that confidence, their mental health suffers, right? And this is especially tough for maybe middle school and high school, and especially for us women. Right? We have constantly judged ourselves. We are constantly looking at others and comparing ourselves to others, or they're comparing us to them and making us feel bad because we're not like them. What would happen instead is that if we focused on kind of how unique we are and what kind of contributions we made. So, and now we enter the world of all of the Instagram filters, Snapchat filters, and even AI. And we know that this is a game changer and not necessarily in a good way, right? We're constantly thinking of ourselves going, oh gosh, that picture of me, that would look way better with a filter, right? We know that, right? I know I'm almost 56 years old. And so I've recognized that filters would look way better on my picture. So again, it's about owning who we are and kind of putting aside and letting go of those things that we're not. Okay. And so, one of the things I had to figure out was this woo. So woo is my top number one strength. So woo, for those of you that don't know, is short for winning over others. And I really struggled with that because to me, my immediate was, and they even showed pictures of like a politician. I'm like, that is not me. I have nothing against politics. It's just not me. And so I questioned it quite a bit. I resisted it quite a bit, going, that's not me. Is this right? And instead, what I had to do is kind of figure out who I was as a woo. And for me, it turned out to be about that connection piece. And yes, my relator ability, that's like my number 7 talent, is equally as important to me. That's the ability where I have lifelong friendships. I have a gang of friends of 40 plus years. And those are incredibly important to me. My friends and people that I know now, I make very intentional connections with them because that's important to me. So this is how woo is presenting itself to me. And I've owned that, because if I kept fighting on it, nothing good was going to come from that either. So then, 2 other things here I want to point out. Again, back to Trevor Reagan, right? He gives us another speech about the difference between, it's called like learning like a jungle tiger. And so if you've never heard this analogy, I'm going to challenge you to think about, are you more of a jungle tiger or a zoo tiger? Okay. So a zoo tiger, as you might imagine, is constantly throughout the day protected, taken care of, provided food, shelter, all sorts of these things without question, without thinking about it, right? There are no kind of higher stakes for that junk or for that zoo tiger. They are ultimately living their best life for the most part. They may not be very comfortable in that cage either, but let's just say that safety and security is right there at the top. In contrast, the jungle tiger is out on their own. They are surviving every single day. They're having to navigate difficult situations. They're having to do lots of different things compared to a zoo tiger. And so I challenge you and ask you to think about this question, not only for you as a leader, but also your team members. Because obviously, we want our leaders to be more of like, or aspire to be more of a jungle tiger, right? Self-sufficient. Like if we always have to have our boss looking after us going, okay, I need to have regular check-ins, like not every week or every couple weeks, but every day. That's tough for managers and leaders for them to do that, especially if it's a large team. So instead, we want to be able to empower them and give them the skills and the abilities and the tools to be successful as a jungle tiger on their own. And we want that same for our own team members. Okay. So there has been this kind of philosophy and this idea that we want people to follow us, right, as leaders. But instead, wouldn't you rather have them as an actual, their own jungle tiger? Again, just like I just described, we don't want to constantly be babysitting and holding hands and checking in on everything, right? We want them to be able to be successful on their own. And guess what? They're going to feel better about that too. So anyway, I think that's super powerful. I just want you to kind of reflect and think about that. I use that a lot, quite a bit in my classes as well, and really encourage students to think that way from a growth mindset and really thinking about how might I grow. And in high school, guess what? Most of them are probably mostly zoo tigers, right? Because they're living at home and things are kind of handled for them and taking care of them. But living out, moving into and transitioning into college is a huge step. It might be the first time they've ever had to be a jungle tiger. And that is tough. And that's how sometimes students fail. And that's how sometimes students need those extra resources. And we here at Kirkwood are here to give them and support them. And then lastly, Simon Sinek is also a fantastic speaker that I just adore and respect greatly. And he uses this golden circle. And as a leader, again, I want to challenge you, have you think about how this looks for you. And his comment is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And so whether you're in sales or you're in education or healthcare, why are you doing it? What's your why? And if you focus on that why rather than what I'm doing every day, that's going to change your mindset. And it's really going to lead to a little bit more powerful environment for not only you as a leader, but also you and your team. So think about those couple things again through this little jam board, and hopefully you've really, had an opportunity to kind of pause and reflect about a number of these different things. So this is again one of my favorite analogies. I use this all the time with my students and strengths. So when you think of strengths, I want you to think beyond the job description. Okay. So right here we have Patrick Mahomes on our as quarterback, and we have Jawan Taylor here, who's an offensive tackle. They are in the same game. They're on the same team, Kansas City Chiefs. They have the same job. They have the same goal, but they have very different strengths. And so I want you to think about this for a second. Given the job description being the same and they have different strengths, where do we put them? Where do we put them to be most successful? What if their roles were reversed? What if Mahomes was now on the line at 100 pounds less than Jawan? What if he was there and what if Jawan was on as a QB? Okay. So I want you to think back to my swimming analogy and think about whatever is relevant for you. But again, think about that job description and thinking beyond it. Because at this point, if we reverse those roles, it would be very uncomfortable, perhaps unsafe, be miserable. Again, they didn't sign up for that, right? That's not what they've been working for all of their lives. And again, sometimes we play to win, oftentimes, right? But what's the cost? And so again, I love this analogy, and I want you to kind of think about this too. And again, thinking back to that swimming story of mine, again, it pushed me to quit. And I hated that. But I knew that for me, quitting swimming at some point was going to happen. And I was okay. And I told my own kids this, that everything has an ending. It's a matter of figuring out when your ending is for that particular thing. And I was okay with it because I knew that the trade off was going to be super important to me for my mental health, my well being, my happiness, all of those things. Okay. So, again, I want you to kind of challenge you to think beyond that job description. So here is a grid. If you've ever done strengths, maybe you've seen something like this, but I've blocked out the names here, but essentially this is our admissions team at Kirkwood, and I am working part-time for admissions, and I just love this experience so much, and I love this team. But I want you to see here is kind of what this looks like. And so if you can kind of look at the strategic side of it, we have one particular person that's highly strategic. And we have one person that's highly relationship building. Okay. They're both doing the same job. They're just bringing something different. So, what might happen, what a good thing that might happen might be, hey, guess what? We're going to do some vision and some kind of strategic planning. Who do you plan? Who do you call to the table? The relationship builder or the strategic thinker? Maybe you do both, but it would be a disservice to not ask that strategic thinker. Okay. Whether or not that he would traditionally be at the table for that. This is something that is going to be really comfortable for him. He's going to thrive in it. He's going to love it. Okay. Just like the relationship building is with that particular person. Okay. So it's just really important to kind of think about, again, where do your strengths line up? Again, this is just the top 5. We have all 34. But where do they line up in terms of how do they compare with the rest of your team, and how are we supporting each other and utilizing them, calling upon them when we need them? So what's next? So the most important thing is to really know your team. And so if you choose to sign up and do some assessments, that's fantastic. I think it's great. I think you'll learn a lot about yourself and, again, your team. And I think again, I go back to the very beginning. This gives you permission to be who you are, to celebrate that, rather than determining or figuring out what you aren't. Okay. So by completing those assessments, you're going to have those understanding on a deeper level, much like my mom did with those roles that she was supervisor, or that she was participating and immersing herself in, right? But this is going to be on a deeper level. This is their innate being. This is beyond the job description. Okay. So if we do that, ideally it would be great if you would work with a Gallup certified coach. Again, it could be me, it could be somebody else. There's lots of them in the area, that would really help you kind of focus in on that. What does your team look like? So whether it's beyond the grid. So the grid is important. It's really interesting, but there's a lot more we can do about that. We can also look at how things pair up. And so anyway, there's a lot of opportunities for growth and deeper understanding there, and helping you navigate your own team. And the next is kind of committing to it. So what's very common with strengths and with any assessment, whether it's Enneagram or anything else, colors, is that we do the assessment and we put it aside, and that we just we don't remember. We're like, oh, I did that 5 years ago. I don't remember what that is. Well, shucks, I really want you to know and own it. And, whether that's, having it as part of your regular touch base meetings with your team members and going, how did you use your strengths today? Because chances are, the moment you describe your best day at work, chances are you were using those strengths. So the goal is, how do we identify what those are and what that day looked like? And let's try to replicate that as much as we can. Because again, that's going to lead to that greater productivity, the engagement, and the happiness in and outside of work. Okay. And then other ways you can do that, obviously, is, I put mine on my email signature, all 5. I put them on my resume. You can post them in your office, or on your bathroom mirror. How are you using it? What does it look like? Again, permission to explore and to be exactly who you've always been, and celebrate that, rather than, again, focusing on those weaknesses. So again, it's pretty fantastic. And then lastly is the name, aim, and flame. And again, I'm going to share a story with you. So right before I became certified in 2017, I had just hired a new part-time person at Kirkwood, and they were going to be a test proctor, and they applied for it. It wasn't like I actively recruited this person for it. She applied for this job, and I immediately thought two things. First of all, this is not the right job for her, but I really want her on my team. And then hopefully you've felt that before, is what you've met somebody going, I don't care what it takes. I want them on my team. We've got to figure out a place to put them on the right seat of the bus, right? And so at the same time, our frontline person is highly strategic, a lot of behind the scenes detail work, and requires a lot more kind of intentional thought processes and again detail. And so what was happening, that frontline person who was doing all that attention to detail was often caught in a lot of interruptions and disruptions in their daily work. And it was just something that we experienced all the time. And so it wasn't even something that we really thought about, other than I just felt bad. And again, I'm woo. So I'm like, okay, I'll take those interruptions. I'll take the calls. That wasn't right. That wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. I had other things I was supposed to be doing too. Anyway, what I discovered is that, wouldn't it be cool if I switched, not necessarily their roles, but I physically switched their location? So this test proctor, yeah, she still did some proctoring for a while there. But ultimately, I placed her on the front line because this person was full of woo, super outgoing, super extroverted, and loved those distractions, loved students, loved working and meeting and talking with our faculty and supporting them. The other person, it wasn't that she didn't, it was just that she was hyper focused, that analytical, that deep, this deeply analytical and attention to detail was so important to her, and hyper focused on it, that it was hard for her to not get distracted. And again, once we flipped that, it was fantastic. It was much Both of them were much more engaged and fulfilling and happy in their roles. I can guarantee it. Okay. And it was met with some resistance, because again, we were looking at job descriptions. But once we look beyond those job descriptions and figure out what's the best for the team, what's the best for the students, what's the best for these people, it really was a game changer for all of us. And it really kind of shifted into this kind of strengths-based culture for us. And loved it. I know exactly who to call on for that budget. I know exactly who to call on for somebody that's going to help me with a presentation. I know exactly who is going to organize all of the fun student activities. Okay. And so once you kind of figure that, and yes, some of this was pretty obvious just based on their personality, but all of that is deeply rooted into those innate talents. Okay. So anyway, this is that name, aim, and flame. Name is kind of figuring out who you are. Aiming it is kind of strategically aligning that. So on our daily work where I have a chance to use it. And flame is really taking it to that whole nother level, celebrating those successes, sharing it with upward leadership, whatever we can do, saying this is a great success story, and I'm really proud of my kind of visionary leadership skills in here, but also everybody's willingness to allow me to do it. So we also know that through leadership, we just can't survive on strengths alone. We can't always just be these special snowflakes just showing up for work and doing everything that we want to do. There are jobs to be had. So it's important for us to look at a few other things. And on the left side of the column there, we have recognition and a people first culture. And what's really important about that is it seems pretty obvious too, but is that really to individualize people and their praise and their recognition for what they're doing, making things personal. And there's this kind of philosophy, again, I mentioned earlier about, whether it's change or having people follow you. Following is great as a leader, but again, isn't it better when we want them to just do things on their own and celebrate that? We want to grow leaders as well, not just followers. So again, that recognition is going to help identify, how do you want to be praised and recognized, and what can I do to help support you get there? Okay. And then also that people first culture is kind of in that same boat, but also just being very authentic and listening. And sometimes this comes with a little bit of resistance, because not everybody is going to want to share and overshare like I do, right? Sometimes people are very personal and want to protect that, and that's fine, but give them an opportunity. Give them the opportunity to share what they're about and know their family, know their people, okay, and celebrate them. It doesn't have to be that you're Facebook friends or, Instagram friends and whatever. It's a matter of just getting to know them. And then also kind of checking that empathy pulse. Some of us, empathy is one of our strengths, right? We all have it. Some of us have a lot of it and some of us don't. My daughter, for instance, is highly empathetic. And I oftentimes feel for her because when if somebody's close to her that is really feeling sad or whatever, she legitimately feels that with them. Okay. I don't. It's just not who I am naturally. It doesn't mean I can't empathize or can't sympathize with them. I just don't feel it in the same way she does. So you have to just kind of take your pulse going, okay, where am I with this? How can I help be supportive and empathetic? Um, Knowing that isn't super easy for me. Okay. And then on the right side there is that we have two things that kind of go hand in hand as well, is that margin and that rubber band state. It's really recognizing through your team members, ideally by way of their strengths, what's their different between their load and their limit. What's safe? What's a safe operational limit? I was at a conference a while ago, and there was this great story that or analogy that they brought up that I really liked. And they asked the question, would you rather hire somebody that is working as hard as they possibly can, but can never reach the goal? Or would you rather hire somebody that reached the goal in 10 minutes out of an hour and then does nothing? So I want you to think about that. And again, it's about understanding that load and limit. And there is no right answer. I can tell you what I would do. I would hire somebody so the person that isn't reaching the limit or isn't reaching the goal, they're in the wrong spot. They're not using their strengths, right? It's not comfortable for them. The other person who hasn't who reaches that goal very easily needs to be challenged, also probably needs a different role, somebody to be motivated. If they're doing that, they can certainly do that even better, and we can encourage, we can motivate. But chances are, why would they work twice or three times as much if there's no kind of reward for them, and no kind of recognition, no kind of praise? So again, that margin is just super important in terms of recognizing where everybody's operational limit is. Okay, great book there called Slowing Down to the Speed of Joy. Okay. And then that rubber band state, if you've never heard that too, there's also a fantastic book there, and there's a couple of them out there. And it's about recognizing how far you can bend without breaking, right? And sometimes the rubber bands break over time just from wear and tear, right? We all have wear and tear. And sometimes they snap because of the amount of pressure that they're put under. And so it's about recognizing how far can you and your team members handle this. Okay. So part of that is really knowing and honoring your own reset. So again, for some people, at the end of the day, and think about for yourself, is that do you need a short reset or a full reset? Like reboot at the end of the day. Some of you, it might be a short drive home. Some of you might be coming home to a very chaotic and busy home. I know I was when my kids were little. Again, I was thriving in that, right? It wasn't always easy, but I was thriving. I loved that chaos, right? But some of us need a longer reset. We need 15 minutes. And so it's important for you to not only acknowledge and honor, but also communicate what that need is. So if you get home and you're like, I just feel like I'm going to be a bear if I dive right into making dinner and getting homework ready for my kids or doing whatever, you're going to eventually get burned out and be resentful towards others. And obviously, it's the last thing we want to do with your own close family members, but also your team members, right? So again, what's that breaking point? And again, what is your reset button at the end of the day? Honor that, really know it, and figure out what you need. Sometimes it's a matter of just being. My good friend Sheila describes being, and she challenges me to do that. It's just be. And I'm always like, oof, that's really hard for me. I don't sit still very often. And so by being and kind of even grounding, if you've never heard of that, is like intentionally taking your shoes off and sitting in the grass for a little bit. That's a powerful thing to do, especially if you're force yourself, and especially if you do it unplugged. Okay. So sometimes I have to remind myself to do that. That hard reset is hard for me. I'm generally fine with that short term. So moving on to kind of our compass check is a couple things. I'm just some questions I want to pose to you. And I want you to think about this. What is your mission? What's the difference between your job and your work? And this one is super important. Okay. Colleague or peer brought this up to me one time, and I just love it. Okay. It's a matter of thinking about what is your job that you're doing every day. That's the actual job you're doing. The work is how you do it. Okay. How you do it. So, what is the message you are sending alongside that? What are you modeling? What does your time and energy look like? Okay. Are we barely getting by? Are we doing bare minimum and then checking out for the rest of the day? On Monday morning, are we already checking out and thinking about the weekend? Or if we're getting close to retirement, is it all about the IPers as shown there on the ray gun shirt? Okay, so it's important that, while we all have great goals and we all aspire and look forward to doing different things, whether it's the weekend or whether it's retirement, doesn't matter. Is that what does that time look like between that? So again, I just challenge you kind of think about what does that time and energy look like? How are you holding yourself accountable with your strengths and making sure that those are aligned so that each day when you're there, you're feeling fulfilled so it doesn't feel like we're checked out. We're not watching the clock. We're not watching the days go by. Okay, so think about that. And then lastly, this one is really super important too. Some guy, he mentioned this to me and he said, "What's love got to do with it?" Just like the song, Tina Turner, back in 1984. Love is powerful. And a lot of times we talk about passion, and this is about the work you're doing. So I want you to think about healthcare, education, childcare, for instance, just to use those as examples. What does love and passion look like in those roles compared to somebody who doesn't love their job, love their work? And I'm going to challenge you to think that you probably don't want your children or your loved ones in any of those environments for people that don't love their job. So again, it's more about, again, lining those strengths. And if you're not lined up with your strengths, how can we get you there? Right. And how can we make sure that you are loving what you're doing every single day? Okay. We don't want everybody looking for Monday. And going to wrap up here. I know I'm just about out of time, but just a few things of I call leadership survival skills. And the first one is management. And as a ranger, as one of my top strengths, somebody once called me a conductor. And at first I'm like, what? I am not musically inclined at all. It was much like that kind of artist thing. It's like, I would love to be an artist or love to be a musician, but that's just not comfortable for me. Instead, they challenge me to think like I am a conductor in terms of my leadership. I recognize everybody's strengths in the orchestra, okay? And I assign the roles like instruments. Okay? So, as you might imagine, I have my hands up and I am conducting. I've got a lot of things going on here, but it's up to me to know how and when to create that momentum in each of those parts. Okay. And again, there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of things going on. I used to call it like spinning plates, but in this case, it's like this big orchestra of all these things, these wonderful things going on. And we are best when we all come together, right? We know that they recognize that sometimes we have to focus in on this area or this area or this area, and that's fine. But when we're all together, all at our maximum potential, that's when we create the most beautiful work. Okay. And then the next one is supporting and listening like a therapist. Okay. And again, that is a little bit tougher for me with communication because sometimes I want to talk more than listen. Ask questions and encourage problem solving skills instead of offering advice. Okay. And whether this is working through a personal problem or through a work problem, again, think about those problem solving skills. That is going to help them become a jungle tiger. If we give them all the answers and we solve all the problems for them, that is the zoo tiger. Okay. So I have this picture next to this, and you can see everybody walking up. This is Dunn's River Falls. This isn't my actual picture, but I did do this with my high school friends. This is in Jamaica. This is a beautiful, beautiful area, and it's quite intimidating. So you walk up this waterfall, literally arm in arm. And I use this analogy quite a bit because sometimes in life we have to be prepared to push people along, push our team members along, and sometimes we pull them. And you might be thinking, which one's worse? Which one's better? I don't know. In this particular section or case, I'm going to tell you that it was best to pull. Okay, if I would have been behind and I was in a hurry and I was really comfortable to get up and I just started pushing people along, what would happen? They'd fall, they'd hurt themselves, and they'd be incredibly anxious and scared. So rather than one of my best friends, she's right behind me. And what am I doing? I'm pulling her along because that's what she needed. She wasn't comfortable in that situation. And it was important for me to do that to make sure that she was safe and that she was empowered. Okay. So again, thinking about the people on your team about whether or not there's a push or pull mentality. Okay. And doing that, I was described as right before I retired, somebody described me as a likable badass. I'm like, I didn't even know that. It wasn't something I was aspiring to do. But when you are constantly present and engaged and doing those types of things for other people, that's who you'll be. Okay. So again, champion like that growth mindset. And then that connection, we've talked a lot about that. That's super important to me is seeking energy from those who elevate you, celebrate you and your authenticity and keep you accountable. Sometimes you need people. Again, I truly believe that mentors should be outside of your organization because sometimes you need people to say, Lisa, what in the world are you thinking? Right? And you need somebody to have that gut check. And sometimes it's hard for our own bosses and our own colleagues and peers to do that. We need somebody from an outside perspective that has similar experiences that can share and that can understand that, but not necessarily be in the same boat. Sometimes that gets too uncomfortable and too personal. Okay. So making sure that you are connecting with people inside and outside your organization. I call that the art of connection. Okay. And then there's that reset again. Again, so powerful. This is a part of your reset button. Grabbing your life vest before you need it. Right. And we obviously want to know that, again, or fixing that rubber band or releasing that rubber band before it breaks, right? We got to know where we're at with things and that margin of kind of where our safe zone is and making sure that we reset every day, whatever works best for you. Okay. Okay, and then lastly here, I just have one last jam board. And I just do this, and this is all stuff that I've been saying, but just to kind of summarize here is that really your weaknesses are never going to change much, right? Even when you constantly exercise those, they'll grow a little bit, but they will never be naturally easy for you. Okay, so instead, focusing on what's working well for you and how can I leverage those? How can I work those to the best? Okay, offer them to the world. And that's what we talked about earlier is like being alive in our work. And that is just going to be an incredible shift in your work and, hopefully inside and outside of your work and in your teams. And so that you can really live your best life. Okay. And then obviously just, customize things. Think about each of them as an individual, but then also collectively, what do we do together as a team? So I've shared my contact information here as well. I think Megan's going to open up. There might be some questions here for me. I'm happy to open it up. I do recognize that we're just about out of time. So otherwise, feel free to email me or reach out in any way. I'd be happy to help as well.
Thanks, Lisa. Yes, now would be a great time to put any questions you have for Lisa in the chat. I've also just launched a really quick poll to get your feedback on how this went today and any future webinars that you'd like to see out here. We did just finalize our October webinar, so please be on the lookout for that information coming up. And I see nothing coming in the chat. So Lisa, that must mean you did such an excellent job. No one has any questions. Great. So
Perfect.
with that being said, thank you all for joining us. I'll let you all get back to your work. Lisa, thank you for your time. I hope everybody has a great day and be on the lookout for this recording. It will be on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and I will email it out. Okay.
Thanks for participating.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye.